Catholic Church anymore. This church and then St. Francis down in Missoula. Everything else has been destroyed over the years. Even the way he painted at Gonzaga was destroyed over the years. So mainly because it was wood buildings and things like that.
So he didn't paint in St. Xavier?
Huh?
He didn't paint in St. Xavier?
So yeah, he painted St. Francis.
Okay, it's called St. Francis, okay.
So yeah, St. Francis Xavier, he painted there too.
Okay.
So the reality is there are, in this area, not counting Dixon, because Dixon's one of the ones who stole land. Do you guys know Mr. Dixon? Mm-hmm. You haven't studied the history of Mr. Dixon? Agents for the tribe. And he was, to be fair, a little bit corrupt. And so he was one of the ones who tried to shove the reservation up past here. Down in John Birchman, down in Arlee at Dirty Corner, there's a church out there. That is the original, and the road there is agency, because that was the original Indian agency, so it's called Agency Road. He's the one who forced it up to where it was for a little bit in Dixon, and then named the town after himself. But he was involved in that land grab. Okay? So, I don't know if you have questions. I can talk about some together. They're called triptychs. So tri is 3, right? So it's a triptych. And these are the visions of St. Ignatius of Loyola. So he had, St. Ignatius is the founder of the Jesuit Society of Jesus, and he had visions, religious visions, and so those are his religious visions. One is at the River Cardinal, where he had a vision of the Blessed Mother, and then writing the spiritual exercises. The second one was at La Storda, where he had a vision of Jesus saying, I want you to do this. And then the third one is he had a vision of Jesus handing him the cross and saying, pick up your cross and go. So that that I want you to be a follower of mine. So those are the triptychs. The lower ones, the lower medallions here, these are all Catholic saints. And then the higher medallions are pictures of the story of Hebrew scripture and then what we call Christian scripture, the New Testament. The father of Jesus, or the stepfather of Jesus, that was one of the first ones we fixed. It was actually cracking and whole chunks of plaster were falling off the wall. And so we fixed that one first. The first summer we did all the Catholic saints on this side, including the boy saints. It was from Turin. And so that would make sense that's why he would use that kind of style painting. Does anyone know the difference between a dry fresco and a wet fresco? Okay, a wet fresco is painted on wet plaster. And so you're pushing the paint into the plaster, and as it dries, it actually becomes part of the plaster. A dry fresco is using the same technique, but it's on dry plaster. So instead of using brush strokes, it's a kind of a tapping technique that you put it. And you can really see it when you get up close to those up there. When I was on the scaffolding, you can see it. One of the things you have to do in paintings like this is you have to create an optical illusion. So they look sharp down here, but when you get up close, they're very blurry. Because he has to make it so you can see it from 90 feet away. One of the things we did during the restoration is try to go back and get it to originally done as possible. So we even used pigmentation from the same lines in Morocco that he used in the first place. The only difference is we added a little bit of lacquer that you can't see under the light, but under a black light you can see it, so that if they come through later years with better technology, they can fix what we did. Okay? Now one over here is the Blessed Mother, and she's holding lilies. Okay? She's holding a thing of lilies. The Blessed Mother with lilies did not become fashionable or in vogue until 1916, when Our Lady of Fatima appeared to 3 peasant girls in Portugal. And so it's Our Lady of Fatima, she's holding lilies. So after 1916, Mary holding lilies was very fashionable. But this was painted in 1904, before Mary was associated with lilies. So there is one painting in the world, there's a couple paintings, but there's one famous painting in the cathedral in Milan of Mary holding the lily. And so did he have exposure to that? We think he probably did. He probably saw that painting in the cathedral in Milan before coming to the United States, and that's why he painted with lilies. 2 other things I'll point out, and then I'll let you walk on. I don't know, are any of you Catholic? I see a couple familiar faces. Okay, the Catholics here. So if you're Salish, most of you would be Catholic, or at least your grandparents were. Huh? Yeah, your dad wrote, your parents were?
Yeah, my mom.
So that would be pretty common. Okay, so there's two things. One, this is a replication of the Last Supper. Now this is from the 1970s. It's a replication of the Last Supper. But what's interesting is who is the one that betrayed Jesus? Does anyone know? Starts with a J.
Fuzzy number.
U. D. Did you get it? Judas, okay? So in this picture of the Last Supper, Judas is present. Judas is present, and he's already holding his 30 bags, his 30 pieces of silver. Okay? So when you hear people say, well, so-and-so can't go to communion, or so-and-so can't go to communion, if Jesus could give communion to Judas, holding the money bag within 15 minutes of being betrayed, anyone can go to communion. Very simple message, okay? The other one is you can look at it back there. I took a bunch of flack when I moved that statue to the back of the room, okay? And I took flack for moving that because they thought I was downgrading Mary because she used to be up here with all the other statues. But that is a 14th century, the statue's a 14th century, but it's a 14th century called Our Lady of Perpetual Help. Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And the reason why I put it in the back of the church is when you go look at it, Jesus only has one sandal. Jesus has one sandal. So how many times have you seen a mom, or maybe you've done it yourself, carrying your little siblings, or a mom carrying her daughter, or a grandparent, or something like that, and the kid only has one sock on? Right? They lose the sock. So that's from the 14th century. So don't think Catholics don't have a sense of humor. Because Italians had a sense of humor all the way back in the 14th century. And we have the statue here to prove it. Does that sound fair? Okay, any questions? So horsehair plasters, when they put plaster, they put horsehair in the plaster as the binding agent. This plaster actually is bison hair. So when the chunks would fall off the wall, it would look like a chia pet because there's so much buffalo hair in it, okay? Then in 1952, getting ready for the 1954 100-year centennial of the parish, they did some repairs and they used slap plaster. And that's a really wet plaster that you kind of throw against the wall and let it seep into the cracks and smooth it over. So when they did that, they painted over all the scroll work on pylons and window seals and things like that. That was all painted over and lost. They thought it was lost forever. But what we did was called an exposure window. An exposure window is when you take a razor blade and you just scrape and scrape and scrape to get down to the original paint that was there. And when we did that, then we could trace these patterns and recreate them from both some old photographs and then from the exposure windows. So the last summer was this, doing all the scroll work and redoing all that. So the total of 4 summers. It was supposed to be $1.2 million. I ended up spending $1.6 million to get all this done. At the same time, I did all the pews. So if you'd been in here about 4 years ago, these pews were painted olive green. And we restored all the pews, had them redone, everything like that. I cut that pew in half. Anyone guess why I cut that pew in half? Huh? No, so your classmate can join us. In most churches, right, the wheelchairs and things like that go away to the side, right? So the person can't be part of the bigger group. But you're part of the class, right? You're part of the bigger group. And so we want to make sure that anyone is part of the bigger group. So we cut that pew in half so that we could have wheelchairs in there and motorized scooters. So it's always about including people in the larger group no matter what. Yes?
Why is the cross the symbol when Jesus died?
Well, the cross is a symbol of Jesus died because that was the main method of execution for the Romans. Is they would use, actually it would be a piece of wood, and they would hang it up so it became a cross. It wasn't a cross per se, but it was a piece of wood, and then they'd hang it. But that was the main symbol, but it also represents Christ's victory over death. So for Christians, it represents Christ's victory over death. So that even death is not going to be victorious over the love of God. So God's love is always unconditional, and even death is going to be victorious in the resurrection and the life of the world to come. So that's why we use the cross. The other thing is Christians, most Christians, Catholics in particular, but most Christians always use something negative and make it a positive. So in this case, we use this horrible symbol of torture and execution and killing, and we make it a piece of art that some of you wear around your neck, some of you wear on your earrings, and we decorate buildings with, right? So we take this horrible thing and we make it a positive. the water compact. So if you're Salish, you now own all the water in the state of Montana, basically. Which is an important thing.
It's huge.
Big deal. All right, anything else, or you guys just want to walk around and look? Okay, walk around and look, and if you have questions, just come see me. St. Michael, the archangel, casting people into hell. And so they started laughing, and so he asked them, why are you laughing at my homily? And they said, look, only white people in hell, no Salish. And so they painted feather headdresses on these three faces closest to us. They painted feather headdresses on them to show that no Salish could go to hell too. And the Salish broke in the night and carved off the feathers. And so you can still see the knife marks and the carvings where the feathers were, but we left it because the original painting didn't have feathers, so we left it without painting. We do restoration, we left it without putting the feathers back on. But it's a great story. I use this at funerals all the time because the Salish like to know that only whites go to hell. No Salish go to hell. You guys know that?
Wow.
Back then, I was trying to look, but I didn't, he just pointed over here, and he was talking about that.
Who was your grandpa?
My buddy McDonald, he died.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I did that funeral.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, that was me.
So he was talking about that.
Yeah, I was talking about this painting right here.
Oh, well, I was trying to look at it and didn't really see it, so I was like,
Well, you can come over and look at it now. It's nice and easy.
okay.
I know.
Beautiful to each other.
The knife marks you can see on these three faces right there. You just see them. They look like lions where the feathers were.